The prairie winds whispered across the open Texas plains, carrying with them the scent of dust, sagebrush, and the promise of a new life. Emma Whitfield clutched the worn satchel in her lap as the stagecoach jolted along the rutted trail. Her heart pounded with each turn of the wheels, her thoughts spinning like tumbleweeds. She had answered an ad in the Denver newspaper, a rancher in need of a wife, a home in need of a woman's touch, and a little girl in need of a mother. She had never laid eyes on him. All she knew were the letters, steady, honest, written in the plain hand of a man who had seen hardship and kept on standing. His name was Daniel Harper, a widower raising his daughter on a spread of land that stretched farther than the horizon. Emma pressed her gloved hands together, whispering a silent prayer. She wasn't sure if she was strong enough. She wasn't sure if she was ready to carry another's grief when she still carried her own. But the moment she stepped down from that coach, dust swirling around her skirts, her eyes met Daniel's, and everything inside her shifted. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his sun-browned face carved by years of hard work under the western sun. His eyes were steady, though shaded with sorrow. He removed his hat, inclining his head politely. "Miss Whitfield?" "Yes," she managed, her voice catching. "I'm Daniel Harper." His voice was deep, calm, like the earth itself. He glanced at her small satchel, then back to her eyes. "You've had a long ride. Let's get you home." It was a word she hadn't expected to hear so soon. The wagon ride to the ranch was quiet, save for the creak of the wheels and the distant cry of meadowlarks. Emma kept sneaking glances at him, studying the strong set of his jaw, the quiet patience in his manner. But it wasn't Daniel who stole her heart that day. It was the little girl waiting at the ranch gate. Clara Harper, no more than 6 years old, stood with a rag doll clutched to her chest. Her hair was wild from the wind, her eyes wide and searching. When the wagon stopped, she didn't run to her father. She didn't hide behind her doll. She looked straight at Emma. "Are you the lady?" she asked, her small voice carrying across the yard. Emma's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly. "I suppose I am." Clara's next words shattered every fear Emma had carried with her. "Can you be Mama?" The world seemed to still. Daniel's breath caught audibly beside her, but it was Emma who moved first. She knelt in the dust, gathering Clara into her arms. The child fit perfectly against her heart, as though she had always belonged there. Tears blurred Emma's eyes, but she held them back for the sake of the little girl who clung to her. "Yes," Emma whispered into Clara's hair. "I can be Mama." From that moment, Emma's life began to change. The days on the Harper Ranch were long and filled with work, cooking, cleaning, tending the small garden, mending fences alongside Daniel when needed. The land was harsh but beautiful, the sunsets painting the sky in fiery colors that seemed almost holy. Daniel worked from dawn until dusk, his strength steady and unyielding, but Emma noticed how his gaze often lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. It wasn't a look of mere gratitude. It was something deeper, something that grew with every passing day. At night, when Clara was asleep, Emma and Daniel would sit on the porch, the stars blazing overhead. They spoke little at first, just sharing the silence of two souls who had both known loss. But gradually the words came. He told her about his late wife, taken by fever when Clara was just a baby. She told him about the family she had lost in the war, about the loneliness that had driven her west. One evening, Daniel's voice broke through the quiet, low and thoughtful. "I didn't know if I was doin' right by sendin' for you," he admitted. "Seemed selfish, bringin' a stranger into this life. But Clara, she needed more than I could give. And maybe I did too." Emma's heart ached at the honesty in his tone. She reached out, laying her hand gently over his rough, calloused one. "You didn't bring a stranger, Daniel," she said softly. "You brought someone who was waiting for a place to belong." From then on, the bond between them grew unshakable. Clara began to smile more, laugh more, her little footsteps chasing through the fields like music. Daniel began to soften, the heavy weight of sorrow lifting little by little. And Emma found herself falling, not just for the child who had called her Mama, but for the man whose quiet strength steadied her heart. But life in the West was never without trials. That spring, a drought struck the land. The fields cracked, the cattle grew thin, and every day was a battle to keep the ranch alive. Daniel grew more burdened, more withdrawn, the shadows of his old grief threatening to return. One evening, after a long day of watching him labor in silence, Emma confronted him on the porch. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said firmly. He looked at her, weary eyes clouded. "It's my responsibility. My land, my family. I can't let you shoulder that." Emma stepped closer, her voice steady. "You asked me to be your wife, Daniel Harper. You let Clara call me Mama. That means I am family. And family carries things together." Something broke in him then, not in weakness but in surrender. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as though afraid she might vanish with the wind. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. Emma's reply was firm, unshaken. "You deserve love, Daniel. And so do I." The drought passed as all storms do. Rain fell again, soaking the earth, filling the air with the scent of new life. The ranch survived, stronger than before. So that months later, under a sky of endless blue, Emma stood hand in hand with Daniel on the porch while Clara tugged at her skirt, giggling with joy. Daniel's arms slipped around Emma's shoulders, drawing her close. "I sent for a wife," he murmured, voice filled with quiet wonder. "But I found so much more." Emma looked at Clara's bright eyes, then back at the man who had opened his heart to her. "And I found a family I never expected." The prairie wind swept gently across the land, carrying with it the promise of love, the strength of hope, and the unshakable bond of a family forged not by chance, but by choice. And for Emma Whitfield, once lost and alone, the Wild West had given her a home, where a rancher's daughter needed a mother, and a bride found her forever. The following winter settled over the prairie with a sharp bite, snow dusting the peaks of the distant mountains. Life on the Harper Ranch grew quieter, evenings filled with firelight and the smell of Emma's fresh bread baking in the hearth. Clara would curl up on the rug with her rag doll, her laughter spilling into the warm air as Emma read from her small collection of books brought from back east. It was in those moments, Daniel stretched out in his chair, Emma's voice weaving stories, Clara's soft giggles, that the house felt whole again. The echoes of loneliness that once haunted its wooden walls seemed to fade into memory. One evening, after Clara had drifted to sleep in Emma's arms, Daniel lingered near the fire. His eyes rested on Emma as she gently carried the girl to her room, tucking her beneath the quilt. When Emma returned, Daniel's gaze was steady, yet filled with unspoken weight. "You've changed this place," he said quietly. Emma tilted her head. "The house?" "No," he said, his voice low, warm. "Me. Clara. Everything."